He rose and moved toward a woven container draped with fabric. Inside lay half a dozen gleaming fish, their scales catching the dim light of the dwelling. These were no ordinary catch, clearly possessing a luminescence and freshness that defied typical understanding. "You will take these," he instructed, his voice deep and resonant, leaving no room for argument, "and proceed directly to the marketplace. Offer them openly for sale, just as any other vendor would. But listen carefully to my words, for there is a crucial consequence. Anyone, without exception, who consumes this fish will suffer a profound and lasting loss. They will acquire a spiritual stench, an unseen taint that repels good fortune. Their favor, their prosperity, their forward movement in life will inexplicably abandon them and, by some hidden mechanism, transfer directly to you." Her eyes widened in surprise, her breath catching in her throat at the sheer audacity and dark implications of his proposition. "You will become wealthy swiftly, beyond your wildest imaginings," he continued, leaning slightly forward, emphasizing the promise. "Blessings will inundate your life like a sudden, unstoppable deluge, washing away the years of deprivation. But there is a price for others. Sorrow will fall upon them. You will effortlessly claim what they relinquish." Aisha faltered, her initial hope clashing violently with a deep-seated moral unease. I do not wish to inflict hardship upon others," she stated, her voice small and trembling. The man's voice, previously calm, grew sharper, laced with an undeniable edge of challenge and cynicism. "Has hardship not afflicted you sufficiently in life?" he retorted, his gaze, though unseen, felt like a physical weight upon her. "Did the world not disregard your anguish utterly? Did anyone, offer you aid or comfort when you wept alone in the darkness of the night, your stomach empty and your spirit broken?" Her gaze fell to the floor, the weight of his words, coupled with the bitter memories they evoked, causing her hands to tremble visibly, betraying the depth of her internal conflict. He pressed on, seizing the moment of her vulnerability. "The choice, Aisha, rests entirely with you and you alone. You can cling to the familiar ache of hardship, returning to the life of relentless struggle and want, or you can choose a different path. You can bear this container, go to the trading place, vend these fish, and never again in your life know want, hunger, or the sting of degradation." After a protracted and heavy silence, during which the air in the small dwelling seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities and moral weight, Aisha slowly nodded her head. The need, the desperation she felt for her family, finally outweighed her apprehension. I will undertake it," she whispered, the words feeling both heavy and liberating. The man smiled, a slow, chilling expression that did not reach his unseen eyes. "Good," he said, his voice regaining its calm, authoritative tone. "But recall these 3 directives and heed them with absolute fidelity," he cautioned, his words like unbreakable bonds being forged around her. "Never, under any circumstance, partake of the contents of the container yourself. Never fail to attend the trading day. You must be present whenever the market is open. And never, ever reveal the true origin of your fish to a single soul." He paused, letting the gravity of his final warning settle upon her. "Should you violate any of these stipulations, any single one, you will be answerable to powers far beyond my influence, powers whose wrath is swift and merciless." He recovered the container, which seemed to pulse faintly with a hidden energy, and offered it to her. In a sudden, disorienting flicker, the smoky dwelling vanished, and Aisha found herself back at the forest's edge, the dense trees towering around her. The woman in crimson had vanished as mysteriously as she had appeared. The container rested in Aisha's grasp, solid and undeniably real. The agreement, binding and irreversible, was sealed. The unfortunate fish seller, Aisha, whose life was about to be irrevocably altered, was the firstborn of her parents, shouldering the heavy responsibility that often falls to the eldest daughter, especially in impoverished circumstances. She was the senior sister among 7 siblings, all of them living in a home of extreme and crushing poverty, a truly deprived existence where every day was a struggle for survival. Her father had once been a farmer, cultivating the land with pride, but illness and a relentless series of ill fortunes had left him weakened, unable to perform the strenuous labor required to sustain his family. Her mother did what she could, selling greens and vegetables in the bustling marketplace, but often, heartbreakingly often, she returned from the trading grounds at the close of the long day with her entire stock unsold, the meager earnings insufficient to provide even a single meal for her hungry children. By the time Aisha reached the tender age of 16 years, she had already, by necessity, assumed the role of the family's primary provider. Her parents, weakened and disheartened, relied on her desperate efforts for their sustenance, and her younger brothers and sisters looked to her, their eyes filled with a heartbreaking mix of hope and hunger, as their sole beacon of survival in a bleak world. She labored tirelessly, pushing her body and spirit to their absolute limits. She attempted every conceivable endeavor that offered even the slimmest chance of earning income, hawking bottled water beneath the relentless sun, cleaning garments for wealthier families, preparing and selling fried snacks by the roadside, assisting merchants at the busy trading grounds with whatever tasks they required. Yet, despite her unwavering effort, nothing she tried offered lasting stability. Either her hard-won earnings were pilfered by opportunistic thieves who preyed on the vulnerable, or the venture itself crumbled due to lack of capital, unexpected competition, or sheer bad luck. Each attempt to advance, to climb even a single step out of the abyss of poverty, was met with an unforeseen obstacle, something that held her back, keeping her trapped in the cycle of want. Her physique was perpetually weary, aching from endless labor, and her thoughts were constantly occupied with worry, a persistent hum of anxiety about the next meal, the next bill, the next day. But she persevered, driven by the love for her family and feeling utterly devoid of any other alternatives. The weight of their survival rested squarely on her young shoulders. One sweltering afternoon, she sat beneath the sparse shade of a mango tree beside the dusty path, the world seeming to blur around her as she contemplated her bleak circumstances. She had not eaten since the faint light of dawn, her stomach gnawing with hunger, and her worn sandals were broken, offering no protection to her cracked and calloused feet. At that moment, a woman entirely unknown to her passed by. The woman was tall, her skin the color of rich earth, and she was attired in a deep crimson cloth that seemed to absorb the harsh sunlight. She possessed an undeniable air of distinction, carrying herself with calm grace. She was beautiful, yet somehow subtly peculiar, a presence that drew the eye but also suggested something just beyond ordinary understanding. She halted before Aisha, observed her silently for a few moments with an unnerving intensity, then offered a small, knowing smile. "You appear exhausted, child," the woman remarked, her voice low and clear, cutting through Aisha's weary thoughts. "I possess the means to assist you, to lift you from this endless struggle," the woman declared, her voice imbued with a quiet certainty. "But you must possess the courage, the willingness to accompany me into the unknown." Aisha offered no immediate reply, merely looking up, her eyes wide with bewilderment and a flicker of desperate hope. "Return here tomorrow at the first light of dawn," the woman instructed, her tone firm yet gentle. "Your life, as you know it, has the potential to transform completely." With that, she turned and walked away as silently as she had appeared, leaving Aisha alone once more beneath the tree. Aisha watched her depart, a whirl of confused questions swirling in her mind. Who was this woman? Why had she stopped? What kind of assistance could she possibly offer? Yet, that night, as she lay upon her hard sleeping mat in the cramped family dwelling, the woman's enigmatic words occupied her thoughts incessantly, replaying themselves over and over in her mind. The promise of transformation, of an end to her suffering, was a powerful lure. The following morning, long before anyone within her family enclosure had stirred from sleep, Aisha quietly rose, secured her simple cloth wrap around her, and departed, her heart a mixture of fear and desperate hope. She returned to the shade of the mango tree and waited. Just as the sun began its slow ascent over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold, the woman reappeared, as if emerging from the very air itself. She spoke few words, her instruction brief and direct, simply turning and saying, "Follow me." Without a moment's hesitation, driven by an almost primal urge, Aisha rose and trailed her into the dense woods that bordered the village. That day, unknown to her at the time, marked the beginning of a profound and irreversible alteration in her destiny. Aisha followed the woman into the heart of the forest, the path becoming less distinct with each step, uncertain of their destination or the true nature of the journey she had embarked upon. She did not know the woman's name, nor did she feel compelled to inquire, a strange sense of inevitability guiding her steps. All she knew with absolute certainty was that her existence thus far had been burdened by an excess of difficulties, by relentless struggle and heartache, and perhaps this unexpected encounter was, at long last, the divine assistance for which she had been praying, a sign that her suffering was finally to end. As they ventured deeper, the woods grew eerily quieter. There was no cheerful birdsong, no gentle rustling breeze through the leaves, only the soft, rhythmic sound of their footsteps on the dry foliage scattered across the forest floor. After walking for what felt like nearly an hour, their journey brought them to a small, unexpected clearing bathed in the filtered sunlight. In its center stood a humble, aged dwelling, fashioned from red earth and roofed with dry palm fronds, looking as though it had existed there for centuries, part of the very landscape. Peculiar markings, symbols she did not recognize, were etched around the low entrance, and small clay pots filled with unknown, potentially potent contents were placed carefully beside it, lending the place an air of mystery and ancient practice. The woman turned to face Aisha, her expression unreadable. "This is the abode of the one capable of helping you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You will enter now. Refrain from speaking a single word until you are addressed directly. And most importantly, have no fear. You are protected on this threshold." Without another syllable, the woman seemed to dissolve back into the surrounding trees, vanishing completely, leaving Aisha standing alone and slightly trembling before the modest, yet somehow imposing, structure. Aisha inhaled deeply, gathering her courage, and stepped inside. The air within the dwelling was warm and thick with a faint, smoky scent of herbs and earth, although she could discern no visible fire. The single chamber was dimly illuminated by a solitary earthenware lamp resting on the packed earth floor, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Then, in the quiet stillness, she heard the voice. "You are present," it stated, deep, resonant, and utterly calm, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. Seated at the far end of the dwelling was a man. His body was adorned with intricate patterns drawn in white clay, and multiple strands of cowrie shells encircled his neck, rattling softly as he moved. He had no discernible eyes in the conventional sense, yet Aisha sensed, with an unnerving certainty, that his gaze was fixed directly upon her, piercing the dimness. "I am aware of your purpose for coming here," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. "You seek liberation from the chains of poverty. You desire, above all else, to provide for your kin, to see them free from want. You are weary of degradation, of the world trampling upon you." Aisha slowly nodded in affirmation, unable to speak, the truth of his words resonating deeply within her. "Good," he continued, a hint of approval in his tone. "But comprehend this fundamental truth. Every bounty, every gift of fortune, carries a cost. Nothing is truly free in this existence." He rose from his seated position and moved deliberately toward a woven container draped with a piece of dark fabric. Inside lay half a dozen gleaming fish, their scales shimmering even in the low light. These, it was immediately apparent, were no ordinary catch. They possessed an unnatural vibrancy. "You will take these," he instructed, his voice firm, "and proceed directly to the marketplace tomorrow. Offer them for sale, openly as a normal vendor. But be aware, and let this truth sink deep into your soul, Anyone who consumes this fish will suffer a distinct and measurable loss in their life. They will acquire a spiritual stench, an affliction not of the body, but of the essence. Their favor, their prosperity, their forward movement and good fortune will abandon them and, in a mirror exchange, transfer to you. Her eyes widened in shock and disbelief, the full, chilling implication of his words washing over her. You will become wealthy swiftly, beyond your current comprehension, he continued, his voice now laced with a seductive promise of ease and abundance. Blessings, material and otherwise, will inundate your life like a sudden, powerful deluge. But sorrow, hardship, and struggle will vanish from your own path. You will claim, effortlessly, what they relinquish. Aisha faltered again, the dark nature of the transaction stirring her conscience. I do not wish to inflict hardship upon others, she stated, her voice weak, a last flicker of innate goodness resisting the temptation. The man's voice grew sharper, edged with impatience and a pointed cruelty. Has hardship not afflicted you sufficiently in life? He repeated, his question a direct challenge. Did the world not disregard your anguish, turn a blind eye to your suffering? Did anyone, offer you a crumb of aid or comfort when you wept alone in the desolate silence of the night? Her gaze fell, the weight of past suffering a heavy burden, and her hands trembled visibly, her resolve weakening. He pressed on, offering a stark, undeniable choice. The choice rests solely with you, Aisha. You can revert to the crushing familiarity of hardship, to the endless cycle of want that has defined your years, or you can choose a different destiny. You can bear this container, go to the trading place, vend these fish, and never again in your life know the gnawing ache of hunger or the despair of poverty. After a protracted and agonizing silence, during which the conflict raged within her, Aisha finally nodded her head in reluctant agreement. The desperation for her family's survival was the dominant force. I will undertake it, she whispered, the words a heavy commitment. The man's smile widened, a knowing, predatory expression. But recall these 3 directives and let them guide your every action, he cautioned, his voice stern. Never, under any circumstances, partake of the contents of the container yourself, not even a single flake. Never fail to attend the trading day. Your presence there is paramount. And never, ever reveal the true origin of your fish to anyone, not even your closest family. He paused, his voice dropping slightly. Should you violate any of these stipulations, even the smallest one, you will be answerable to powers far beyond my influence, forces that show no mercy. He recovered the container, which now seemed to glow with a faint internal light, and offered it to her. In a startling, abrupt flicker, the interior of the dwelling vanished, and Aisha found herself standing back at the forest's edge, the trees looming around her. The woman in crimson had vanished completely. The container rested in her grasp, cool and solid. The dark agreement was sealed. Aisha returned to her village that afternoon bearing the container, the weight of it feeling heavier than its physical form suggested. She spoke not a word of her encounter to anyone. Her mother, noticing her unusual absence, inquired about her whereabouts, but Aisha simply offered a small smile and replied that she had been visiting a friend in a nearby settlement, a half-truth that deflected further questions. She proceeded directly to the rear of the family enclosure, found a secluded spot, cleansed her face with water, and quietly awaited the coming dawn. Before the first hint of light had touched the sky, she was awake, her mind racing with a mixture of fear and grim determination. She secured her cloth wrap, prepared her container, and set out for the trading place, arriving while the air was still cool and most stalls remained closed, their owners still asleep. She located an unoccupied space near the other fish vendors, a spot she had often passed en route to other menial jobs, and settled down, placing the container carefully before her. When she opened the container, the fish within appeared even more vibrant, more gleaming than they had the previous day, almost radiating their peculiar energy. There was no unpleasant odor, no bothersome insects drawn to them, merely a clean, captivating luminescence that immediately drew the attention of the other, already present sellers, who eyed her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Initially, no buyers approached her. She simply sat, waiting, the container before her. Then, a woman passed by, paused as if sensing something unusual, and retraced her steps, her gaze drawn to the radiant fish. "Your fish appear excellent," she commented, a note of surprise in her voice. "They look remarkably fresh. What is the cost of one?" Aisha paused for a moment, recalling the man's instruction, then replied, her voice slightly hesitant but firm, "Offer what you are able, madam. Any fair sum." The woman smiled, perhaps pleased by the unusual pricing, paid her sum, and departed with 2 fish, their scales gleaming in her hand. That marked the initial transaction, the first step down the path she had chosen. Not long after, a young man arrived, dressed in his work clothes. He was on his way to his labor and desired something special to present to his spouse for their evening meal. "Provide me with 3 of those," he requested, pointing to Aisha's container. "These seem far fresher and more appealing than the offerings of the others." Aisha handed them over, accepting his payment, her heart a mixture of triumph and unease. More individuals began to take notice of her, drawn by the unusual appearance of her wares and the quiet confidence she projected. She did not need to call out her wares loudly like the other vendors, nor did she speak extensively or engage in haggling. Yet, inexplicably, her container was empty by the middle of the day. She had sold every single fish. She returned home that evening carrying a sum of money greater than she had earned in several weeks combined, a stark contrast to her usual meager returns. That night, her mother expressed her surprise and relief. "Aisha, you're back so soon? You have already sold everything?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Indeed, mother," Aisha responded, offering a tired but genuine smile. "People appreciated what I offered today. They seem to prefer my fish." Her mother, though still puzzled by the sudden success, did not press further. They were simply relieved and grateful that, at last, after so much struggle, something seemed to be succeeding for their family. But that night, something peculiar and unsettling occurred. As she slept on her mat, Aisha experienced a vivid and disturbing dream. She saw the woman who had purchased the first fish. The woman was seated in her small shop, her head cradled in her hands, weeping inconsolably. Her usual patrons shunned her, walking past her stall as if she were invisible. No one approached her to make a purchase any longer. Her business was failing rapidly. Another vision emerged, shifting like smoke. The young man who had bought fish for his wife was now seated alone, his shoulders slumped. His wife regarded him with a look of utter revulsion, holding her nose, declaring in a loud, disgusted voice that he emitted a foul, unbearable odor, though he himself seemed unaware of it. Aisha awoke abruptly, drenched in perspiration, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced instinctively at the container now resting in the corner of her chamber, hidden from view. It was full once more. Fresh fish, perfectly still, devoid of any smell, free from any insects or sign of decay, only silence and a palpable sense of potency. Weeks turned into months as Aisha continued her daily routine of going to the trading place and selling her mysterious fish. Her reputation began to spread rapidly throughout the trading grounds and beyond. People claimed her fish remained palatable for longer periods than any other vendors, requiring no special storage, and possessed a superior, almost addictive flavor when cooked. More and more customers flocked to her stall, drawn by word of mouth and the undeniable quality of her wares. She amassed wealth at a pace unprecedented in her life, far exceeding anything she had ever dared to hope for. She purchased a new, fine cloth wrap for her mother, beautiful new footwear for her younger sister, even a device for listening to broadcasts, a luxury item, for her father. Her family was astonished by her sudden prosperity, but filled with gratitude, their lives immeasurably improved by her efforts. Her mother, still perplexed, inquired one evening, "Aisha, my child, where exactly do you acquire these fish? You have never been to the river and you don't know any fishermen." Aisha chuckled softly, a sound that now held a touch of confidence it had lacked before. "Mother, I am simply favored by circumstance, it seems. Perhaps my time, our time, has finally arrived." Her mother nodded slowly, though the explanation still left her with a sense of unease and unanswered questions. But Aisha did not cease, because every morning, without fail, when she lifted the cloth covering, the container was miraculously replenished, filled with gleaming, fresh fish. And each night, her dreams grew more disturbing, more vividly unsettling. She persistently saw her customers in her sleep, weeping, afflicted by unseen odors, experiencing profound and inexplicable loss in their lives, financial ruin, broken relationships, illness. Yet, in stark contrast, her own life blossomed. Her skin became radiant with good health, her self-assurance was visibly restored, and the gnawing anxiety of poverty was replaced by a comfortable ease. Money was never a source of anxiety again. The container provided an endless supply. The container was effective, undeniably powerful, and Aisha was ascendant, rising higher and higher. Within merely a few months, Aisha's existence underwent a complete, dramatic transformation. She was no longer the impoverished, struggling girl with cracked heels and worn garments that barely covered her body. Her skin acquired a smooth texture and a healthy glow, her clothing became finer, made of quality fabrics, and her voice gained a new confidence, a self-assured tone that commanded attention. She had even begun renting a permanent location at the trading place, not just a temporary spot on the dusty ground anymore. She proudly designated it Aisha's Superior Catch and inscribed the name in bold crimson characters on a prominent wooden sign that attracted notice from afar. People journeyed from distant settlements, having heard tales of the miraculous fish, specifically to purchase from her. Her fish never spoiled. They seemed impervious to decay, remaining perfect day after day. They perpetually retained a look of pristine freshness, as if just pulled from the water moments before. No insects were ever drawn to them, no unpleasant odors emanated from the container, merely glistening, beautiful, perfect fish. Aisha was now the prominent topic of conversation at the trading place, her rapid success the subject of both admiration and suspicion. Some vendors, whose own businesses were now suffering as customers flocked to Aisha, voiced their grievances openly. "We cannot comprehend her fish," one would grumble to another. "Why is it perpetually flawless? It defies nature." Others were simply consumed by bitter envy, unable to compete with her extraordinary wares. But none, not even her detractors, could dispute the speed and scale of her ascent. At home, conditions also improved dramatically and visibly. Her father discontinued his strenuous, back-breaking labor and enjoyed more rest and comfort. Her mother, no longer needing to sell her meager vegetables, joined a cooperative savings society for women, contributing confidently from Aisha's earnings. Her younger siblings, for the first time, now wore proper footwear to the place of learning, no longer having to endure the pain of walking barefoot on the hot ground. However, alongside the material blessings, the inquiries, both spoken and unspoken, commenced again. Her mother one day questioned her with renewed insistence. "Aisha, these fish you are selling, do they originate from a special cold store I do not know of? Who is the supplier who provides you with such perfect stock?" Aisha merely smiled, a tight, knowing smile that did not entirely reach her eyes. "Mother, forgo the inquiries. What truly matters is that we are no longer deprived of food, that we have abundance where there was once only scarcity." Her father observed her silently from across the room, his expression one of quiet concern. He did not press for an answer, but he remained somewhat unsettled, a sense of unease clouding his features. Then, strange and troubling occurrences began to be reported. A woman who had acquired fish from Aisha the previous week started to complain bitterly that her small enterprise, which had been stable for years, had abruptly and inexplicably collapsed overnight. A respected man of letters, a scholar who frequently patronized her stall for his household's needs, lost his voice entirely during a crucial public assembly, unable to utter a sound. Another individual who had purchased several fish for a special gathering returned home that evening to discover his spouse packing her belongings, her face contorted with disgust. She claimed he had suddenly begun to emit an offensive, sickening odor, one she could no longer bear to be near. He himself could not detect it, no matter how hard he tried, but everyone else around him could, recoiling from his presence. Despite these unsettling reports and the growing murmurs, Aisha continued her trade, fiercely clinging to the prosperity it brought. She rationalized these events, telling herself they were mere coincidences, or perhaps simply the manifestation of pre-existing troubles that the buyers were experiencing independently of her. She preferred not to contemplate the deeper implications, the dark causality that the man in the forest had described. But the situation worsened, the effects becoming more pronounced and harder to ignore. People began to openly avoid the initial customers who had regularly purchased from her, recoiling from them. They claimed these individuals consistently carried a peculiar, unpleasant smell, not precisely of fish or decay, but something heavier, something that felt spiritual, a taint upon their very being. Murmurs began circulating throughout the trading place, growing louder, turning into open whispers and fearful glances. Aisha's superior catch is not ordinary, one vendor would tell another in hushed tones. My neighbor purchased too and suffered a calamity the very next day. A man who consumed from her stall now speaks to himself during the night, his mind broken. Yet, despite the fear and the dark rumors, people continued to buy from her.
Why?
Because in the course of human experience, the allure of perceived sweetness, the promise of something good and desirable, often overrides the caution born of peril. The hope for a superior meal, a delicious taste, was enough to make many disregard the unsettling whispers and the strange occurrences befalling others. At home, Aisha's dreams began to transform dramatically, shifting from visions of her customers' suffering to something far more personal and terrifying. She no longer saw external hardship. Now she beheld conflagration, devastating fires that consumed everything in their path. She saw fish with eyes that eerily resembled human eyes, their gazes filled with silent accusation. She heard voices articulating her name in the darkness. Voices that were clearly not human, whispers that chilled her to the bone. At times, she would awaken weeping, overcome by the horror of her dreams. At others, she would wake laughing uncontrollably, a wild, unsettling sound that frightened her family. But each morning, driven by the need to maintain her prosperity and perhaps by an unseen compulsion, she rose and proceeded to the trading grounds. One day, her father, his demeanor unusually grave and burdened, summoned her aside, his eyes filled with deep concern. "Aisha," he said gently, his voice low, "I implore you, be truthful with me. Are you engaged in any extraordinary practices concerning this fish you sell? Something is profoundly, terribly amiss. The village is talking." Aisha met his gaze directly, forcing herself to appear calm despite the turmoil within. "Father," she stated, her voice steady, "all that I am doing is merely engaging in commerce, buying and selling. You have offered prayers for assistance in the past, for an end to our poverty. Perhaps this is the response, a blessing upon our home." Her father offered no further comment, but the troubled look in his eyes did not dissipate. That night, he remained awake, visible proof of his worry, engaged in silent prayer, whispering petitions, watching her chamber with a father's protective fear. Meanwhile, heedless of the growing unease, Aisha acquired a parcel of land near the place of learning, a prominent location she intended to build a substantial dwelling upon, a permanent home for her family, a symbol of their newfound status. She established another place of business in a different part of the village, expanding her empire. She even began extending aid to other families in need, dispensing charity from her vast earnings, perhaps a subconscious attempt to balance the scales of her dark bargain. To many, unaware of the hidden cost, she represented a source of blessing, a testament to hard work and divine favor. But to those who observed closely, who connected the dots between her success and the misfortunes of others. She was clearly at the nexus of something perilous, something unnatural. And even she, despite her rationalizations, was starting to sense its presence, a cold dread coiling in her stomach. It was a tranquil midweek morning, the sky a vast, unclouded expanse of blue. Aisha had just commenced operations at her primary establishment, arranging her container as was her daily custom. The fish were once again radiating their peculiar luminescence, smooth, unblemished, undeniably flawless. By this point, she no longer felt any significant unease regarding their appearance. It had become routine, an automatic part of her life, accepted without question. She no longer questioned the means or the reason behind their magic. She simply engaged in selling, focused on the transaction. People congregated around her establishment as was typical, drawn by the reputation of her product. A woman acquired 2 fish for her mother's funeral arrangements, hoping to provide a special meal for the mourners. A young man took one for his recently married wife, a gesture of affection. She greeted them with her newfound confident smile, accepting their money, the transaction smooth and efficient. All appeared to be in order, a typical successful trading day, until he arrived. The stranger was someone she did not recognize at all, someone who did not belong to the usual rhythm of the marketplace. He did not appear to be a customer. He carried neither a bag nor a container for purchases. No one seemed to know his origin or how he had arrived. He was an elderly gentleman, his bearing straight and dignified, dressed entirely in simple white cloth, without foot covering or head covering, suggesting a deep connection to the earth and the spiritual realm. His facial hair was long and gray, cascading down his chest, and his gaze, when it met hers, was steady, penetrating, and held an ancient wisdom. He did not seem ill, or impoverished, or angered. There was a profound calmness about him. But there was something about his presence, an undeniable aura of authority, that caused the bustling trading place to fall silent around him. Even the chattering insects seemed to disperse, a hush descending upon the normally noisy market. He proceeded directly to Aisha's location, stopping just before her stall. She looked up, attempting her usual confident smile, though a prickle of unease had begun to crawl up her spine. "Greetings, elder," she said, her voice slightly less steady than usual. "Do you desire fish today?" The man offered no response in words. Instead, he inclined slightly forward, peering into the container before her with an intensity that seemed to see through the physical form of the fish. Then, he uttered a very simple statement, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. "These fish, child, do not belong to you." Aisha froze completely, her attempted smile vanishing, replaced by a look of stunned shock. Her mouth parted slightly, but no sound emerged. Her voice seemed trapped in her throat. "You are burdened by that which is not yours," he continued, his gaze unwavering, speaking truths she had desperately tried to ignore. "You exist on borrowed radiance, on a prosperity taken from the lives of others." People began to assemble around them, drawn by the sudden silence and the stranger's pronouncement. "Who is this man?" someone whispered, but the elder seemed unconcerned by the growing crowd or their curiosity. He looked directly into Aisha's eyes, his gaze holding hers, and declared, his voice clear and resonant, "Everything you have taken, everything you have acquired through this dark bargain, will soon be reclaimed. The balance must be restored." Then, without making any purchase, without another word, he turned and slowly, calmly walked away, melting back into the flow of people as mysteriously as he had appeared. No one impeded his path. No one dared to follow him or question him further. But Aisha remained immobile, rooted to the spot, the elder's words echoing incessantly within her consciousness, shattering the careful edifice of her denial. "You exist on borrowed radiance." That night, Aisha did not sleep at all. His voice echoed incessantly within her consciousness, relentless accusation. "You exist on borrowed radiance." Her dreams, when she finally succumbed to exhaustion, became even more terrifying, more apocalyptic than before. She witnessed fire again, but this time, The flames were not confined to distant visions of her customers' suffering. It was not merely her establishment that burned, it was her dwelling, the home she had improved for her family, consumed by an inferno. She saw her kindred, her beloved parents and siblings, surrounded by flames, their faces etched with terror. Even the watercourse that ran near the village, the source of life, seemed to be engulfed by fire, all consumed by raging flames, a vision of total annihilation. She awoke with a gasp, jolting upright in the darkness, to find the surface of her chamber floor damp around her. The container, usually emanating a cool, white luminescence, was now glowing a deep, angry crimson instead, pulsing with a sinister energy. And the fish within were moving, not merely twitching or wriggling as fish sometimes do, but actively, purposefully moving within the confines of the woven basket. She gasped aloud, a sound of pure terror, quickly grabbed a cloth, and covered it, desperate to hide the terrifying sight. She sat huddled in the corner of her chamber until the faint light of dawn finally broke, the container pulsing with crimson light in the darkness, a malevolent presence in the room. In the ensuing days, things began to noticeably change, not just in Aisha's life, but in the atmosphere of the entire village. People started speaking openly now, no longer in hushed tones or fearful whispers, but in full conversations, their voices filled with concern and suspicion. "Did you hear what that man said at her place the other day?" one villager would ask another. "He spoke of borrowed radiance. I suspect she is employing some sort of dark practice, some sorcery," someone else would state. The timing of her prosperity, coupled with the misfortunes of her customers, is far too peculiar to be natural. That evening, overwhelmed by a desperate need to check on her assets, Aisha went to inspect the second place of business she had established, the one situated near the main path leading into the village, a symbol of her expansion. Upon her arrival, she found it desolate, utterly empty. It had not been ransacked. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle. It was entirely empty, as if it had never contained anything at all. Every shelf, every container she had placed there, every single item of stock was gone. The windows were unbroken. The entries were not forced open. It appeared, eerily, as though nothing had ever occupied the space, as though it had been wiped clean by an invisible hand. She questioned the vendor situated nearby, a woman she knew well. "What transpired here?" Aisha asked, her voice trembling. The woman appeared genuinely bewildered. "Aisha, my dear, what are you speaking of? This space has remained unoccupied since its construction. No one has ever done business here." Her carefully constructed resilience nearly gave way under the weight of this impossible reality. That night, she returned to her home, her mind reeling, and discovered a written note placed conspicuously upon her sleeping surface, right where she would find it. No name was signed, and the script was a strange, unsettling form she did not recognize. It simply declared, stark and chilling, "Confess, or all will be consumed by fire." The following morning, the entire village awoke to a chorus of murmurs and whispers, a palpable sense of unease hanging in the air. Some claimed they had experienced vivid, terrifying dreams of inferno during the night. Others asserted they had heard strange vocalizations, disembodied voices, carried on the wind, speaking of judgment. But everyone concurred on one matter. Something was profoundly, terribly amiss in the village, centered around Aisha's unexplained prosperity. Aisha did not attend the trading place that day. She sat alone within her family enclosure, withdrawn and silent, holding the container in her lap. The fish inside no longer radiated light. The crimson glow was gone, replaced by a dull, heavy darkness. They were dark, still substantial, as if laden with the entire, oppressive weight of everything they had absorbed from the lives of others. Then her father entered the enclosure, his presence a quiet comfort. He had spoken little to her in recent days, his worry evident in his silence. "Aisha," he said gently, his voice filled with sadness, "we have heard things, terrible things. People are conversing openly now. The Council of Elders desires to meet with you, to hear your account." She nodded slowly, unable to deny the inevitable confrontation. "I am aware, father," she whispered. "It must be done." "Is it true then?" he inquired, his voice barely audible, his hope dwindling. She met his gaze, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, and the dam of her self-deception finally broke. I never intended to become this way," she confessed, the words tearing from her soul. He sighed, a sound of deep sorrow and resignation, rose, and departed, leaving her to prepare for the reckoning. By midday, the village common area was filled to capacity. The headman, the council of elders, traders from the market, families from every corner of the village, everyone was present, a sea of expectant, fearful faces. When Aisha arrived, her feet bare and dusty, her clothing soiled, no longer the fine garments she had come to wear, the entire assembly fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. She stood at the center of the multitude, alone yet the focus of every eye, and then she spoke, her voice surprisingly clear and steady despite her inner turmoil. "I am aware of what you have all been hearing, the stories circulating," she stated, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "It is accurate." A collective gasp swept through the gathering, the confirmation hitting them with visceral force. "I did not acquire these fish from any normal location," she continued, her confession unfolding. "I did not catch them in the river. I did not store them in a cool place. I was provided a container by a man in the forest." Murmurs began to ripple through the people as the extraordinary nature of her claim became clear. It was connected to unseen forces, to things not of this world, she explained, relaying the man's words, the truth pouring out of her. "If I sold the fish, the fortunes, the prosperity, the favor of those who consumed them would inexplicably transfer to me." Tears streamed down her countenance now, hot and heavy, as she spoke of the snare she had entered. "I desire to cease, to stop this terrible trade, but I was unable." Each attempt to abandon it, to break the agreement, was met with a threat, a chilling reminder of the consequences. I was ensnared, trapped by my own desperation. The headman regarded her with a look of profound disappointment and sadness, his face reflecting the community's sense of betrayal. "So, Aisha," he said, his voice heavy with judgment, "all your prosperity, all the wealth you accumulated, was constructed upon the suffering and ruin of others?" Aisha nodded, unable to deny the terrible truth any longer. "Yes," she whispered, the word a burden. "I sought only to aid my family, to lift them from poverty, but in doing so, I brought ruin and hardship upon others." Then the shouts erupted from the crowd, their fear and anger boiling over into accusations. "She cast a curse upon my husband." A woman shrieked, her face contorted with grief. "My sister perished shortly after partaking of her fish," another cried out, her voice thick with sorrow and rage. "She must face retribution for what she has done." But Aisha did not flee, did not attempt to defend herself further. She sank to her knees in the dusty common area, her head bowed in abject surrender. "I am sorry," she whispered, the words inadequate to encompass the depth of her actions. The container beside her, the source of all her fortune and all her undoing, began to quiver violently, shaking as if possessed by a powerful force. Then, unexpectedly, shockingly, it ignited in a sudden, fierce burst of flames, brighter than any ordinary fire. People shrieked and scrambled back in terror, fearing the fire would spread. But the flames did not spread beyond the confines of the container itself, consuming it entirely until only a pile of fine dust remained where the woven basket had been. As the last of the container vanished, Aisha emitted a piercing, heart-wrenching cry, throwing her head back. Then, bizarrely, the cry transformed. She began to laugh, wildly, uncontrollably, without restraint, the sound mingling with her sobs. It was a laughter that was simultaneously serious and mad, a terrifying spectacle witnessed in front of the entire village. In that terrible moment, in full view of the silent multitude, Aisha descended into madness. She fled from the common area, her feet bare, her clothing soiled with dust and tears, running wildly into the pathways leading out of the village, tearing at her own hair, simultaneously laughing and weeping, her mind shattered by the revelation and the consequences. No one pursued her. No one uttered a single word to stop her. The crowd merely observed her disappearance down the path, a figure of tragic, self-inflicted destruction. A new establishment she had recently opened at the trading place, a solid building she had been so proud of, also inexplicably caught fire that day. No one could explain the source. There was no lightning, no sign of arson. The roof collapsed inward, the walls fractured and crumbled, the sign bearing her name peeled and melted into cinders, as if erased from existence. By the morning, nothing remained of her empire. Not the dwelling she had meticulously planned to build, not the accumulated wealth she had stored, not the fine raiment she had come to wear, not the aspiration that had driven her. Only Aisha, barefoot, disoriented, wandering near the village entrances, a spectral figure muttering words that none could comprehend, lost in a world of her own making. Following the public outcry, following her terrible admission in the village common area, Aisha vanished completely from the life she had previously known, from the person she had become. People claimed she was sighted moving in circles near the paths leading to the bush, sometimes conversing with the foliage as if it were a living entity, sometimes collecting small stones and referring to them as currency, trading invisible fish for imaginary coins. Her family was powerless to manage her state. The madness was too deep, too profound. Her younger siblings were fearful of her, seeing only a stranger where their protector had been. Her father wept silently, his heart broken by the fate of his firstborn. Her mother entirely ceased attending the trading place, unable to face the stares and whispers, her spirit crushed. The girl who had once embodied the hope and prospect of an entire family's future, the one who had promised salvation from poverty, was now walking without footwear in the dust, chanting incoherent melodies, a tragic figure lost to the world. She no longer recalled her own designation, her name lost in the fog of her broken mind. Within the village, her narrative disseminated like a blaze, a cautionary tale spreading rapidly from mouth to mouth. No one spoke of her achievements any longer, of the wealth she had amassed or the aid she had given, only the grim price that accompanied it, the terrible cost paid by others. Children were admonished sternly. If anyone, any stranger, offers you fish possessing an excessively sweet scent, a shine that seems unnatural, flee immediately and tell us. Parents warned their offspring repeatedly, exercise caution regarding what you consume and from whom you accept sustenance. Not all gifts are blessings. The Council of Elders incorporated her name into stories recounted during evenings of communal celebration, not as a figure of heroism or success, but as a stark and unforgettable cautionary tale, a warning against the dangers of unchecked ambition and forbidden bargains. As time passed, her whereabouts became uncertain. No one knew where she rested at night. Some speculated she had transformed into a spirit of the woodlands, forever bound to the forest where she made her dark deal. Others swore they still saw her, a disoriented figure wandering the vicinity of the village with an unseen container, offering fish to strangers who passed by. No one ever accepted her offer, recognizing the chilling narrative she now embodied. Even years subsequently, whenever someone in the village unexpectedly lost their occupation without explanation, or a betrothal ceremony was canceled abruptly, or a family suffered a sudden and inexplicable misfortune, people would whisper, their voices low and tinged with fear. Perhaps they acquired fish from an individual akin to Aisha. Perhaps they partook of a borrowed radiance. She had become more than a person. She was a narrative, a moral lesson etched into the collective consciousness of the village, a stark reminder that prosperity devoid of integrity is not a blessing but a poison. That wealth constructed upon the undoing of others, built on their sorrow and loss, cannot and will not endure. That every benefit obtained surreptitiously, every gain acquired through hidden means, will one day be unveiled openly, brought into the light for all to see, and no individual, no matter how clever or desperate, evades the repercussions of a misappropriated fate, a destiny unlawfully seized from another. And thus, the girl who endeavored to rescue her family, the girl who once traversed the trading place with the dignity of hard work, became a spectral figure, a tale whispered in the darkness, a silence where her name once brought hope. The villagers continue to utter her name, not to extol her virtues or remember her brief period of success, but to issue a warning to others, a chilling reminder about Aisha, the fish vendor of ill consequence, the girl who made a bargain with darkness. The core lesson of this narrative, a truth as old as time, is that when advancement, when prosperity, is predicated upon the ruin and suffering of fellow beings, it can never yield genuine tranquility or lasting peace. Avarice may proffer material abundance for a time, may seem to grant all that one desires, but it invariably demands a steeper, more terrible forfeiture in the end, exacting a price that far outweighs the initial gain. What is taken in concealment, what is acquired through hidden, unethical means, will inevitably be brought into the light of day, and none can escape the ramifications of a destiny unlawfully seized, a life built on the foundations of others' misfortunes. We express our gratitude, kindred, for remaining with us until the culmination of this narrative, for listening to this tale of ambition, consequence, and the heavy price of a dark bargain. Please contemplate subscribing to our channel if you have not yet done so, to hear more stories and lessons from the paths less traveled. Kindly indicate your appreciation by liking and sharing this video with others, and until we encounter each other again in our subsequent account, farewell and walk with caution on your own journey.